Good morning, you're very welcome back. Now, Donald Trump is set to announce a raft of tariffs targeting all countries this Wednesday. So how real and how worried should we be about the risk to our economy?
We're joined this morning by Dr. Emma Howard, who's dealing with this so much she had to run a half marathon to get her mind off it yesterday. She's an economist and lecturer at TU Dublin, and Ian Guider, columnist at the Business Post. Thank you both so much for being here.
Good morning.
Thanks so much. Listen, we keep on hearing about Wednesday, the 2nd of April. Liberation Day is what it's been called for America, Emma. What's going on with these tariffs that he wants to bring in?
Like everything with Trump, who knows what he's actually going to do and whether or not he's going to stick with it. But the biggest signals that we've had is that he is going to implement tariffs on the EU, most likely at least in two sectors, on the automotive industry and on the pharma industry. We also have heard at various times that he might put just unilateral tariffs on all imports into the US from the EU. And again, he's sort of said different figures at different times, but from what the EU officials, from their talks with his officials, they think it might be in or around the 20% level. So we're going to see something. We're going to get burnt, but basically we don't know how badly just yet.
OK. Ian, in a time of where we've been talking budget surpluses and we've had so much money, you can see there's a real fear, particularly around the papers at the minute, of what's coming this week.
There is, and we have known for some time now that we have been the beneficiaries of corporate America's taxes that probably shouldn't have been collected here, but we have hoarded that money and we have spent it on tax cuts, social welfare increases, housing, all public spending has gone up. And we've known for some time that there is a risk to it, and now that risk is coming home to us now. On Wednesday, we'll find out that if tariffs are put on the pharmaceutical sector, the food and drink sector, the Irish economy is dangerously exposed. And it is a big problem. I know some people are saying this is as bad as 2008's financial crisis or the 2010 bailout. It's not immediately, it won't be on Thursday morning as bad as that, but over the next couple of years, it really could be, because all of these companies in the pharma sector will have to look at their future investment plans.
So this is where we are, Emma, just for people who are sitting there. If Trump puts tariffs on, obviously the consumers in America will be spending 20% extra on those tariffs. There will have to be reciprocal tariffs in the EU, so our goods and services from America will then get more expensive.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the first point to note is there doesn't have to be, but it's the most likely response. And any reciprocal tariffs will actually make the whole thing a lot worse. So what a tariff is, essentially, is one of the most distortionary taxes that you can use. So Trump, during the election campaign, talked about it as being a tax on foreign countries. What it really does, so when they put a tariff on imports into the US, it raises the price of, obviously, goods for consumers, so it feeds into inflation in the US. But it also, a lot of those imports are used. So, for example, in the automobile industry, about 60% of the parts that the American car manufacturers use are imports. So those get more expensive. It hurts the American car industry as well as the foreign car manufacturers. Yeah. It makes those cars more expensive, but it also changes those production decisions that firms make. And it means that there's a loss of jobs within the US, there's a loss of economic growth within the US, and of course that also impacts on the US's trading partners.
But Donald Trump seems to have got the narrative across that we're trying to play the long game on this. Is that right? To the American people?
I mean, he sort of started at the, to begin with, he said, like, this is a good economic strategy and this is going to make America great again. Now,
but it's dropped. I mean, the economy's really plummeted recently,
exactly.
But he's trying to turn the narrative that we are going to get the jobs back. It's short-term pain for long-term gain for America.
He's switched to that narrative. But I mean, we've seen, this is his,
Tell me, from an EU point of view, because I was reading Leo Varadkar's piece yesterday talking about how Ireland needs to stick with Europe. Europe needs to join forces together and try to come back. Could Ireland really be thrown to the wolves a little bit if the EU were to fight back? Because Ireland are in that funny space where they get so much from America.
We are, and if you look at it, we have one of the biggest trade surpluses with America. A tiny country like us, we sell 50 billion more to America than they sell to us. That is distortionate. It's one of the biggest in the EU, and the European Union might say, well, we had Ireland's back during Brexit. That was a good thing for us. But the European Union have said for years, Ireland's corporation tax regime has been a problem for Europe. And they might say, well, you found yourself with this money. It shouldn't have been here. And we're just going to throw you to the wolves a little bit because they're more worried about their own automobile sector, they're more worried about their food sector, their defence sector, all of these things. And we could find ourselves in a little bit of difficulty here. And that is the big trouble. All of those jobs, 50,000 people working in pharmaceuticals, tens of thousands of people working in the food and drink sector here. There is a risk to future investment, but even some of that current investment, if tariffs are put on the food and drink sector, it just makes the price of Irish whiskey, spirits, gins, all of those things, you're just not going to be able to sell them in America.
The Kerry Group, everything that they sell into that country, and they've talked about 200% tariffs on drink from Europe. Emma, can we talk, because again, everything is hypothetical. And when we get into hypotheticals, we can worry about, fear, sabre rattling and fear-mongering and all that kind of stuff. But an awful lot of our ministers have been talking about future jobs, that this could affect prospective jobs up to 80,000 jobs in the future, but that everything's OK now. What do you say to that in relation to the jobs industry that we have here that is based on American multinationals? Because he wants the jobs back in America.
Yeah, so we do know that this will have long-term effects on the economy, and the Department of Finance, together with the Economic and Social Research Institute, produced a paper that looked at estimates of this. But of course, the problem is there's huge uncertainty because we don't know what level of tariffs, we don't know how long they're going to be applied, and we don't know what the European Union's response will be. So, they looked at different scenarios, from the best case scenario where there's maybe a 10% tariff by the US that's temporary and is taken away again, or kind of the worst case scenario where they put 25% on us, the EU put 25% back, and that stays, and that's a permanent tariff. So in that worst case scenario, what we're looking at is increased inflation, but also looking at a drop in GDP growth of up to about 3.7% over the next 7 years. So that's our kind of long-term lower economic growth path that we're looking at, which is going to impact beyond the sectors that are directly affected. Obviously, it will be an impact on the economy overall. Now, on the plus side, if you look at, say, people's jobs who are in the pharmaceutical sector, those companies are embedded in Ireland. Their production decisions are pretty long-term, so they can't very easily just up sticks and move those activities back to the US. If they have some excess capacity maybe in the US, they might be able to, move a little bit back, but they're not suddenly going to shut down in the next weeks or months or even next couple of years. What we have seen as well from the latest trade data that came out from the CSO for January is that firms are already planning for this. So we saw a massive increase in pharmaceutical exports to the US in January. It was up, I think, over about 70% increase year on year. So they're kind of planning already and starting to export lots of extra goods to the US. Yeah, exactly, in anticipation of these tariffs. So short term, it may be that those impacts won't be as huge on jobs, but as has already been mentioned, the corporation tax is where we will be hit very soon. So that's the more immediate concern, is our public finances are very dependent on that tax revenue.
What will the government do? What will they do? Will they have to dip into that Apple money that was meant to be used for infrastructure? Will they have to use these rainy day funds a lot earlier than they thought?
Or increase taxes. So, this is something the Irish Fiscal Advisory Council and economists have been warning about. Our tax base is really narrow, is overly dependent. So more than a quarter, more than €1 in every €4 that the government gets in revenue comes from multinational taxes. And so, for a long time we've been saying you need to raise taxes other places.
And people were ringing the bell like you before the election. Emma, we had you here many days going, oh my God, this is insane, talking about the budget. What are the government going to do now? Just like, whoops, we couldn't see this was coming down the line?
Yeah, all those plans that the government had for lowering taxes, increasing social welfare rates, spending on housing, spending on infrastructure like Irish Water, they're going to have to make hard choices now because we won't have the money to do all of that. As you said, we collect €1 in €4 is corporation tax revenues. The forecasts are half of that money could disappear over the next couple of years, that it wasn't stable. And I think it's something that Donald Trump has in its sights as well. His Commerce Secretary has said Ireland is his favourite tax scam because of all those corporation tax receipts here. That is something that could disappear fairly quickly, and the government are really going to have to start making decisions that they didn't want to make.
We'd love to hear from you at home because obviously we're all walking around going, what is actually going to be happening? It's scary. 0896 111 111. We'd love to hear you how you feel about all of this. Ian Guider from the Business Post, thank you so much for coming into us. And Dr. Emma Howard, economist and lecturer at TU Dublin, who ran a half marathon yesterday.
Well done.
Put us all to shame. Oh my God, thank you so much for joining us, guys.
Thanks so much for coming in.
Now, from airport passenger caps to complaints over the school meal scheme.
Yes, we're going to be talking about the other stories making the papers after the break.